make her miscarry, then throw her out. Get ready to welcome the new lady of the house and my precious son. That voice, the deep, warm voice I had rested my head on every night for the past 5 years, was now as cold and cruel as a blade piercing through my eardrums, lodging deep within my heart. I stood frozen behind the plaster wall of the study, one hand clamped over my mouth to stifle a sob, the other unconsciously resting on my still flat stomach, where a tiny, 3-month-old life was peacefully sleeping. That was my husband, Julian Thorne. He was on the phone with Mr. Miller, the security guard I had always trusted. He thought I had already left for the office. He didn't know I had come back for a forgotten file, and that cruel fate had let me overhear this life-altering conversation. New lady of the house, precious son, Miscarry, throw her out. Each word he uttered was a sledgehammer blow, shattering the rose-colored world I had foolishly painted for myself over the past 5 years. Just 10 minutes ago, happiness for me was the scent of the Phalaenopsis orchids Julian arranged in our bedroom each morning. It was the golden sunlight streaming through the tall, wide windows, bathing our $20 million estate, what people called our home, in a warm glow. And it was the gentle smile of my mother-in-law. Sharon would often hold my hand and say, "You too must live happily. Don't disappoint your parents." I had lived in that fabricated happiness, believing I was the luckiest woman in the world. I am 29 years old, the wife of a man admired by many. He was a successful business director, elegant, silver-tongued, and above all, he loved me with a love I thought was real. He never let me worry about money, nor did he ever ask me to give up my career. He said his wife had to be the most independent and radiant woman. We lived in this estate, a wedding gift left to me by my father before he passed away. My father was a successful entrepreneur. He died young from a sudden illness. I was his only child. He left me not only his wealth but also a great lesson in self-reliance. Perhaps that's why, after getting married, I never allowed myself to become a burden to my husband's family. I quietly handled all the expenses of this house, from the housekeepers and gardeners to the lavish family vacations for Julian's entire family. I did it not to boast, but because I truly saw them as my own family. My mother-in-law, Sharon, appeared to be a kind-hearted woman. She treated me well, never nitpicking about my cooking. She would even defend me in front of relatives, calling me a devoted daughter-in-law. But now, I understood it was all just an act. They were good to me. Perhaps only because of this estate, because of the fortune my father left behind. They treated me like a goose that lays golden eggs, fattening me up, indulging me, just waiting for the day to slaughter me. And Julian, the husband I had loved with all my heart, turned out to be an incredibly talented actor. He could spend an entire evening patiently listening to a client complain, but would snap at me just for asking if he had a tiring day at work. He could spend a fortune on a business dinner without a second thought. But when I wanted to send some money to my own relatives, he would frown slightly. "The money we make isn't easy to come by, honey. We should only spend it on worthy things." I was foolish enough to believe it was because he was worried about our future. It turned out his worthy things were supporting another woman and a secret child. I had gotten used to it. I told myself that all men have their pressures. I learned to become a shadow, a decorative vase in my own home. I didn't ask many questions, didn't complain, just quietly fulfilled my role as a wife and daughter-in-law. I was like a canary in a gilded cage, possessing everything but true warmth. And then, when I discovered I was pregnant, I cried tears of joy. I didn't tell anyone right away. I wanted to keep this secret as a surprise, a master key that I believed could unlock his once cold heart. I imagined how happy Julian would be. He would embrace me tightly. There would be no more late nights, no more furtive phone calls on the balcony. But I was wrong, terribly wrong. The child in my womb was not a symbol of hope. It was a thorn in his side. It was the final obstacle preventing him from welcoming his new mistress and their precious son into what I had mistaken for our home. The phone call ended. I heard Julian's footsteps leaving the room. I quickly held my breath, sneaked back to the bedroom, and collapsed onto the bed, pretending to be fast asleep. My tears soaked the pillow, but my heart was no longer filled with desperate pain. It had turned into a chilling rage that reached my very bones. I am Eleanor Hayes, daughter of Arthur Hayes, a man who never bowed his head to anyone. I will not cry. I will not fall. You wanted to act in a play? Fine. I will act with you. But in this play, the script will be written by my own hand, and the ending will surely be a hell you could never have imagined. I lay still, feeling Julian's breath beside me, the breath of the man who, just minutes ago, wanted to take the life of his own child in my womb. My chest no longer ached. It was empty. 5 years of love, of absolute trust, all crushed to dust by that one cruel sentence. I suddenly remembered my father. The day I decided to marry Julian, my father, who was already gravely ill, called me into his study. He didn't object, just looked at me for a long time and said something whose meaning I only now fully grasp. Eleanor, a true diamond isn't afraid of the flame. But remember, you are the one who holds the torch, not the kindling meant to be burned. I didn't understand then. I only saw Julian as the perfect man. He appeared in my life when I was at my most vulnerable, as my father battled his illness day by day. He wasn't like other rich kids who only knew how to party. He had ambition, talent, and above all, he treated my father with a sincere respect. He could sit for hours listening to my father's stories about his early startup days, could personally feed my father spoonfuls of soup. He told me, "I admire your father. He's a legend. To be his son-in-law is the honor of a lifetime." His family, Sharon and his relatives, also seemed incredibly kind. They never asked about my family's wealth, only saying that their greatest blessing was having such a virtuous daughter-in-law. Sharon held my hand and said gently, "We're not a wealthy family, dear, but we have big hearts. When you come here, just think of it as your own home. Don't stand on ceremony." I believed all of it, believed I had found a truly peaceful harbor after years of just me and my father relying on each other. Our wedding took place not long before my father passed away. On the day his will was read, everyone was stunned. My father had left his entire estate, including 100% of the company's shares and this house, solely to me. Julian, as my husband, was not named on any asset. I was worried, afraid it would hurt him, would make his family feel awkward. But no. Julian's reaction moved me to tears. He pulled me into his arms right in front of the lawyer and everyone else. He said, "Your assets are my assets. I don't need anything. I just need you." That sentence dispelled all doubt in my heart. It turned him into a saint in my eyes, a man who truly loved me, not my immense fortune. And his family was the same. They didn't utter a single word of complaint. My mother-in-law even told relatives, "The wealth belongs to the girl, left by her father. As long as they love each other, we're content." From that day on, my trust in him and his family was absolute. I let my guard down completely. He said the company needed capital. I readily signed the papers. He said his mother needed money for home renovations. I immediately transferred the funds. He said relatives were sick, and I didn't hesitate to help. I thought it was my duty, the responsibility of a wife and daughter-in-law. Now, lying on this cold bed, I realized how incredibly foolish I had been. My father had seen through it all. He left the assets to me alone, not to test Julian, but to give me a way out, an ultimate weapon to protect myself. You are the one who holds the torch. Yes, my father had placed the torch in my hands, but I had turned myself into dry kindling, ready to burn for a false love. Julian and his family weren't without greed. They were just exceedingly clever and patient. They weren't nibbling at small bait. They were waiting for the big fish me to completely lose my guard, waiting for the day they could swallow everything in one go, and the baby in my womb was likely the opportunity they had been waiting 5 years for. It wasn't the fruit of love. It was a fatal weakness, a chain they believed could bind me forever. The sound of the shower stopped. I quickly closed my eyes, regulating my breathing. Julian emerged, a towel wrapped around his waist. He tiptoed to the bed, wrapped his arm around my waist, and placed a light kiss on my cheek. "Sleep well, my love." His voice was as gentle and warm as ever, but his touch made me shudder with disgust. A venomous snake was lying right next to me, whispering words of love while its fangs were ready to end me. I didn't move, just felt his hand gently glide over my stomach. Perhaps he was thinking about his cruel plan, thinking about how to eliminate this child, to eliminate me. I no longer felt pain. The pain had morphed into a cold fury, a fierce will for revenge. This play, I would no longer let them write the script and direct. From this moment on, I would take back control. I would become an actress 100,000 times better than them. I would make them walk into the very trap they had set, let them taste the feeling of being deceived, of being betrayed, the feeling of losing everything just when they thought they had the world. Dawn peeked through the curtains. A new day began. I knew that from now on, every day would be a battle of wits, but I also knew I was no longer alone. I had my child, my father's legacy, and a cruel but deserved plan for revenge slowly taking shape. And the first thing I needed to do was find out who this new lady of the house and precious son my husband spoke of really were. The next morning, I woke before Julian. I went into the bathroom and looked at the woman in the mirror, dark circles under her eyes from a sleepless night, her face pale, but her gaze no longer held its naive, dreamy quality. It was sharp and resolute. I applied light makeup, just enough to hide my fatigue, and chose an elegant cream-colored silk dress. I had to continue playing the part of a happy wife, a wealthy woman basking in the joy of impending motherhood. When I came downstairs, Julian was already at the dining table, scrolling through his phone. Seeing me, he looked up and smiled brightly. "Good morning, my love. Did you sleep well?" That smile, yesterday I would have found it as warm as the morning sun, but today I only found it sickeningly fake. "I slept wonderfully," I replied, my voice sweet. "Maybe it's because I'm going to be a mother soon. I feel so at peace." I deliberately emphasized the words, "be a mother," observing his reaction. A flicker of annoyance crossed his eyes but was instantly masked by an even wider smile. "Of course, I'm so happy too. From now on, you don't have to worry about a thing. Just let me handle everything." He said this while his thumbs never stopped moving on his phone, probably texting his new mistress. I sat down, poured myself a glass of orange juice, and asked casually, "Honey, I was thinking of going shopping for some baby things this afternoon. Can you come with me? It's my first time. I don't have any experience." Julian looked up, a bit flustered. "This afternoon? Oh, I have a really important meeting with a partner this afternoon. How about this weekend?" "That's fine," I said, pretending to be slightly disappointed. "But I heard you've been meeting with Isabella Vance a lot lately, the daughter of the chairman of the Anson Corporation. I saw a lot in the news about your two companies collaborating on a project." I threw out the name I suspected most. Isabella Vance, a beautiful, talented woman from a powerful family. If Julian was looking for a new mistress to help him climb the social ladder, no one was more suitable. Julian flinched, the spoon in his hand nearly clattering onto his plate. How did you know?" "Oh, I just read it in the news," I laughed, feigning innocence. "I think she's both beautiful and talented. A true model of a successful woman. You must be learning a lot from working with her." The suspicion in Julian's eyes faded, replaced by a look of smugness. "It's just business, you know. Work is work." He tried to sound modest, but she is very intelligent. "If this project succeeds, our company will take a huge leap forward." I nodded, feigning admiration, but a storm was raging inside me. So, it was true. The new mistress was Isabella Vance, and the precious son he mentioned. Could it be? My stomach clenched, but I wouldn't allow myself to be weak. "Well, you should focus on your work then." "I can handle the shopping myself," I said, my voice full of understanding. "Oh, by the way, honey, I was thinking of inviting your mom to come stay with us for a while. As my belly gets bigger, having her here to look after me would give me peace of mind." This was my first move. I needed my mother-in-law, Sharon, in this house. She was a key player in their scheme, and I needed her right here, under my watch, so my play could have a special audience member. Julian seemed a bit hesitant. "Mom staying here? Would that be convenient for you?" "Why wouldn't it be?" I pouted playfully. "She loves me so much, I'm sure she'd be thrilled. Besides, with her here, you won't have to worry about me as much, and can focus all your energy on that big project." "Didn't you say it's for our future?" My words hit their mark. He needed time and space to be with his lover. With my mother-in-law here, she could both monitor me and create opportunities for him. 2 birds, 1 stone. All right, he nodded. I'll call and talk to her. That's a great idea, honey. That afternoon, Sharon moved in. She brought a mountain of luggage, as if she planned to stay for a very long time. She embraced me, rubbing my belly, her face beaming with happiness. My dear daughter-in-law, you must be exhausted. Don't you worry about a thing. Just focus on the baby. From now on, I'll take care of everything in the house. She spoke sweet words, but as her eyes glanced at me, there was a sharp glint, a calculating look I had failed to notice for 5 years. Yes, thank you, Mom, I replied, hugging her back, an embrace full of pretense. My play had just gained a veteran actress. That evening, I intentionally left my tablet in the living room. I knew my mother-in-law was a very curious person, and I had prepared something on it just for her. It was a photo album titled Family Memories. Inside were ultrasound pictures of my baby, articles on prenatal care, and interspersed among them were a few photos of me with Mr. Miller, the security guard. The pictures were completely innocent, just him helping me carry things or opening the car door. But for someone with a suspicious mind like Sharon, they would become something else entirely. I needed to plant a seed of doubt in her heart, so she would no longer fully trust her precious son. Later that night, when I went downstairs for a glass of water, I saw the glow of the tablet screen illuminating my mother-in-law's thoughtful face. She was scrolling through my photo album. When she saw me, she jumped and quickly turned off the screen. I pretended not to notice anything, just smiled. Mom, you're still awake? What are you looking at so intently? Oh, nothing, just some old pictures, she replied, her voice a little flustered. You should get to bed early, it's not good for the baby. I nodded and turned to walk upstairs, a cold smile playing on my lips. The seed had been sown. It was only a matter of time before it sprouted, and I knew that once the sprout of suspicion grew, it could destroy even the strongest of bonds. The days with my mother-in-law in the house made the estate feel more suffocating than ever. Sharon was indeed a talented actress. In front of me, she was the devoted mother-in-law, forbidding me from lifting a finger, making nourishing soups every day, forcing me to eat one dish after another. You have to eat a lot to make my grandchild strong and healthy, she'd say. But behind my back, I knew she was constantly watching, scrutinizing. Her eyes followed my every move, from how I talked on the phone to when I watered the flowers in the garden. Especially after the night she snooped on my tablet, her attitude towards Mr. Miller, the security guard, changed drastically. She became harsh, finding fault with him for trivial things. Why isn't the car washed properly today? Why did you open the gate so slowly? Are you trying to make guests wait? Mr. Miller just worked in silence, but I knew he understood. I had unintentionally dragged him into a difficult situation. Occasionally, when it was just the two of us, I would deliberately act a bit more friendly towards him. I'd ask him to help me get things from high shelves or inquire about his son's studies. Each time, I could feel Sharon's razor-sharp gaze on us from inside the house. The seed of doubt I had planted was beginning to take root. Meanwhile, Julian continued to be engrossed in his own play. He came home less and less, the excuse always being the demanding project with Anson Corporation. Every time he came back, he brought a small gift for me, a box of artisanal chocolates, a silk shawl. He played the role of the loving husband who, despite his busy schedule, never forgot to care for his pregnant wife at home. And I, in turn, played my part as the understanding wife perfectly, without a single word of complaint. You're working so hard, just focus on work. Mom and I are here at home, I'd say, personally undoing his tie while feeling nothing but disgust. One afternoon, as I was reading in the living room, my mother-in-law approached with a steaming cup of a special herbal tea. She sat down beside me, her expression full of concern. Eleanor, dear, there's something I want to ask you. Of course, Mom. What is it? I put my book down, listening attentively. She hesitated for a moment, then said, Has Julian been acting differently lately? I feel like he's always out. Could it be that he has someone else? I froze. Her move was brilliant. She was testing me. If I showed jealousy or suspicion, she would use it against me, accusing me of being paranoid, of not trusting my husband, and putting pressure on him. If I showed complete trust, she would think I was too naive, too easy to fool. I took a deep breath and forced a gentle smile. Mom, what are you thinking? You know how much Julian loves me. It's just that work has been so stressful lately. He's trying so hard for the future of me, the baby, and his mother's grandchild. I trust my husband completely. I looked directly into her eyes, my gaze clear and unwavering. My answer seemed to satisfy her. She nodded. Good. As long as you trust him, I can rest easy. I was just worried you'd overthink things and it would affect the baby. But I knew the suspicion in her heart hadn't vanished. She was just temporarily reassured that I was still the obedient lamb in her hands. This double life continued. By day, I was the gentle daughter-in-law, the devoted wife. But by night, when the house was asleep, I became someone else. I secretly contacted an old friend who worked in IT and had him install tracking software on the new phone I had gifted Julian for our anniversary. It was an invisible program that could record calls and back up all messages without leaving a trace. And then, the first truths began to trickle in. Recordings and text messages between Julian and Isabella Vance appeared on my computer screen like a cheap romance novel. They called each other honey and babe. They had dates at the most luxurious restaurants. They discussed plans for a European vacation after the big project was completed. But the message that left me utterly frozen was from Isabella to Julian. Honey, our son was kicking so much today. I think he's excited to meet his daddy soon. Our son. So, she was pregnant too, and it was a boy. The precious son Julian mentioned in that fateful phone call was his child with Isabella. It turned out that she and I were both carrying the child of the same man. But the fates of our two children were worlds apart. Her child was the precious son the whole family eagerly awaited, while mine was an obstacle that needed to be eliminated. I sat motionless in front of the screen, tears streaming down my face. This time, it wasn't fury, but a profound sorrow for my unborn child. What crime had it committed? Why did it have to be born into such deceit and cruelty? I wiped my tears, my hand clenching into a fist. Julian, you and your entire family, you don't just owe me an apology. You owe my child a life, a future, and I swear, I will make you pay back this debt, with interest. I will not let my child suffer any harm. I will fight, not just for myself, but for him, or her. My plan had to accelerate, but I never expected that a sudden incident was about to occur, one involving the loyal security guard, Mr. Miller, that would inadvertently push me into a perilous situation. The shock of discovering Isabella was also pregnant with Julian's son had barely subsided when another misfortune struck. That morning, I was in my room when I heard my mother-in-law yelling downstairs. "Oh, for heaven's sake! You useless man! You can't even handle one simple job of watching the cars!" I rushed down to see Sharon pointing at the antique porcelain vase in the corner of the living room, berating Mr. Miller. The vase, an expensive decorative piece Julian had recently bought, now had a long crack running down its side. I just reversed the car a little too hard, ma'am," Mr. Miller said, his head bowed, his voice full of regret. The car vibrated, and it must have shaken the pedestal. "Are you talking back to me?" Sharon cut him off, her voice sharp and cruel. "Excuses, excuses. Do you have any idea how much this vase costs? You could sell your whole rundown house and still not be able to pay for it. You clumsy oaf, get out of my sight! And don't bother showing your face here again starting tomorrow." I stood there, stunned. I knew my mother-in-law could be strict, but I never imagined she could treat an elderly man, someone who had worked for the family for years, with such cruelty and humiliation. Mr. Miller said nothing more, just bowed his head silently and turned to leave. His thin, lonely figure disappeared behind the gate. The look in his eyes as he glanced at me was something more than sadness. It was disappointment and bitterness. Watching him go, a sense of unease washed over me. Mr. Miller wasn't just a security guard, he was the only witness to Julian's cruel command. Now that he was fired, it was as if I had lost a crucial ally, a trump card I hadn't even had a chance to play. "Mom, don't you think you were a little too harsh?" I said tentatively. "It's just a small crack. We can have it repaired." Sharon whipped around and glared at me. "What do you know? When things in this house are broken, someone has to be held responsible. If you don't teach them a lesson, next time they'll tear the whole house down. This is staff business. Don't you get involved. Go upstairs and rest." She then sat down on the sofa and turned on the TV as if nothing had happened. Watching her, a chill ran down my spine. She didn't fire Mr. Miller just because of a broken vase. There had to be another reason. Had she noticed the unusual friendliness between him and me? Or was this a calculated move to eliminate a dangerous witness? I returned to my room, my mind in a turmoil. I had to find a way to contact Mr. Miller. I couldn't let him leave with such resentment and misunderstanding. I searched through my old contacts. Luckily, I still had his number. I waited until my mother-in-law was taking her afternoon nap before I dared to secretly call him. "Hello? Who is this?" Mr. Miller's voice on the other end sounded tired and distant. "It's Eleanor Hayes, sir," I said softly. "I'm calling to apologize for what happened this morning." There was a short pause, then he sighed. "It wasn't your fault, ma'am. I was careless at my job, so I'll take the blame. It's just—" he hesitated. "It's just that I never thought the lady of the house could say such things." "I understand," I said sincerely. "You've worked so hard for our family for so long. My father and I will never forget your service. I have a small severance for you as a token of my gratitude. Please accept it." "No, ma'am, please don't do that," Mr. Miller quickly refused. "I can't accept it. You're pregnant. You need to save money for the baby." His kindness brought tears to my eyes. "Mr. Miller, I'm not just calling to apologize. I have something incredibly important to discuss, something concerning the safety of myself and my baby. I need your help. I know it's not right to bother you now, but I truly have no one else to trust. I was betting on his kindness, on the bond he had with my late father." Mr. Miller was silent for a long moment. I could hear his heavy sigh over the phone. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "Just tell me what you need, ma'am. Your father saved my family's life once. I've never forgotten that debt. As long as it's the right thing to do, I will not refuse." I breathed a sigh of relief. "I can't talk over the phone. Could you meet me somewhere private tomorrow?" I gave him the address of a quiet cafe in the suburbs, a place I was sure we wouldn't be followed. The call ended, and I felt as if I had found a glimmer of light in the darkness. But at the same time, another big question arose in my mind. What were Julian and my mother-in-law hiding that made them so hastily and cruelly get rid of Mr. Miller? Was the broken vase really just an accident? Or was it just an excuse? A staged scene to carry out an even darker plot? The next morning, I used the excuse of a routine prenatal checkup to leave the house. My mother-in-law, without a hint of suspicion, even reminded me to be careful. Her fake concern now just made me feel sick. I didn't go to the hospital. Instead, I drove straight to the cafe in the suburbs where I had arranged to meet Mr. Miller. The cafe was tucked away down a small side street, incredibly quiet and discreet. Mr. Miller had arrived early. He was wearing a faded plaid shirt, his weary face etched with deeper lines of worry. Seeing me, he quickly stood up, a look of apology on his face. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have made you come all this way." "It's no problem, Mr. Miller." I smiled and gestured for him to sit. "I'm the one who should be thanking you for agreeing to meet me." I didn't beat around the bush. I told him everything about the fateful phone call I had overheard, about Julian's command to make her miscarry and then throw her out. I spoke while trying to hold back my tears, but my voice still trembled. Mr. Miller listened in silence, his weathered hands clenched into fists on the table. His expression shifted from surprise to shock and then to outrage. When I finished, he lightly slammed his hand on the table, his voice low and filled with anger. That godless man. I never thought Mr. Thorne could be so devoid of humanity. He looked up at me, his eyes full of pity. "Ma'am, it's my fault. I should have realized it sooner. For a while now, Mr. Thorne has been acting strangely. He often comes home late at night, always clutching his phone. But I just thought it was some affair, some fooling around. I never imagined he could be so wicked as to want to harm his own child. I couldn't believe it either," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "Mr. Miller, I need your help. You are the only person who can testify to what he said. I need your statement to expose his true face before the law." Mr. Miller nodded without hesitation. Don't you worry, ma'am. Whenever you need me, I am ready to testify. I owe your father my life. I can't stand by and watch his daughter be harmed like this." His decisiveness moved me deeply, but then his eyes narrowed, his face filled with thought. "But ma'am, I don't think it's that simple. The way the mistress suddenly fired me, I don't think it was just because of the vase." "I think so too," I replied. "I suspect she discovered something, or she wanted to eliminate you, a key witness." Mr. Miller pondered for a moment, then said something that completely shocked me. "Ma'am, there's something I've been debating whether to tell you, but at this point, I can't keep it hidden any longer. That vase, it's true that my car's vibration caused the crack, but it wasn't because I reversed too hard." "What do you mean?" I frowned. Mr. Miller lowered his voice, glancing around before continuing. "That morning, before it happened, I saw Mr. Thorne doing something furtive in the corner of the living room, near the vase. He was holding something small, like a little hammer. He tapped the leg of the pedestal a few times, then quickly put it away when he heard someone coming downstairs. I didn't think much of it at the time, but after what happened, it struck me as odd. That pedestal is very sturdy. A slight vibration from a car couldn't possibly crack a heavy porcelain vase like that. I suspect the crack might have already been there." His words sent a jolt through me. A charade. An elaborately staged charade. Julian had deliberately created a crack in the vase, then just waited for the smallest excuse from Mr. Miller to use his mother to fire him. He had planned it all. He wanted to eliminate the only person who knew his secret, so he could freely execute his plan with no one in his way. Julian's cunning and calculation once again surpassed my imagination. He wasn't just cruel to me and his child. He was willing to frame an elderly man who had served his family faithfully, all to cover up his crimes. "Are you sure?" I asked again, my voice trembling. "I'm not 100% sure," Mr. Miller replied. "But with what you've just told me, I believe my gut feeling is right. Ma'am, you must be extremely careful. These people, they will stop at nothing." I sat in silence, my mind reeling. Things were becoming more complex and dangerous. This wasn't just an affair and deception. It was a chain of meticulously calculated, chilling conspiracies. I wasn't just up against a cheating husband, but a demon in human form. "Thank you, Mr. Miller. Thank you for telling me this truth," I said, my voice filled with gratitude. "Please, stay safe. I believe the day will soon come when I need your help in court." Leaving the cafe, my heart was heavy. I knew I was walking down a treacherous path, but I had no other choice. I had to see it through to the end, not just to seek justice for me and my child, but to expose all of Julian Thorne's crimes. But with what I had, did I have enough strength to fight against such a cunning and ruthless man, or would I fall into an even more sophisticated trap he had already laid for me? The meeting with Mr. Miller instilled a real fear in me, but at the same time, it ignited an even stronger fire of determination. I could no longer sit back and wait. I had to take the initiative, find more evidence, and stay one step ahead of him. Returning home, I once again put on the mask of the obedient wife. But inside, my brain was working at full capacity. I began to pay attention to the smallest details in the house, to every word and gesture from my mother-in-law and Julian. I knew that in this family of actors, anything could be a clue. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, my mother-in-law walked into the kitchen holding a bowl of dark, pungent herbal remedy. She said in her usual sweet tone, "Eleanor, this is a prenatal tonic I made for you. The herbalist said it's very good, helps make the baby strong. A healthy mother means a happy baby. Drink it while it's warm." I looked at the bowl, a sense of alarm rising within me. She had never cared about my health before. Why the sudden kindness, and a traditional herbal remedy from an unknown source? "Thank you, Mom." I smiled and took the bowl. "You've gone to so much trouble. Just leave it here. I'll drink it when it cools down a bit." She nodded, satisfied, and left the kitchen. The moment she was gone, I poured the contents down the sink, leaving only a small amount at the bottom. Then I carefully rinsed the bowl and left it on the counter. I didn't know what was in that remedy, but a mother's instinct told me it wasn't safe. I secretly found a small vial, poured the remaining liquid into it, and hid it carefully in my purse. I had to get it tested. I needed to know what they were trying to do to me and my unborn child. A few days later, under the pretext of shopping for baby clothes, I took the sample to a reputable private lab and requested a full analysis of its components. While waiting for the results, I decided to make another bold move. I knew Julian and Isabella were still meeting secretly. I needed irrefutable photographic evidence of their relationship. I couldn't follow them myself. It was too risky, and I'd be easily spotted. I thought of Mr. Miller's son. His name was Leo, a quick-witted and resourceful young man working as a delivery driver. I had once helped his family with money for medical treatment, a kindness I trusted he hadn't forgotten. I contacted Leo, briefly explained my situation, and asked for his help. "I just need you to occasionally keep an eye on this address for me and see if Julian shows up." I gave him the address of the luxury apartment building where I suspected Isabella lived, a piece of information I had overheard from Julian's phone calls. "If you see him, just take a few photos from a distance. They don't have to be clear shots of their faces, just enough to show him and that woman together. I'll pay you well for your time." Leo agreed without hesitation. "Don't worry, Eleanor. Leave it to me. You helped my family, so it's only right that I help you now. I don't need any money." The young man's integrity moved me deeply. Just 2 days later, the first photos arrived on my phone. They showed Julian and Isabella, hand in hand, walking out of the lobby of the luxury apartment building. Isabella was wearing a loose maternity dress, her baby bump clearly visible. Julian had his arm around her waist, a gesture full of care and protection. Looking at the photo, my heart ached again, but not out of jealousy. I just felt the profound irony of it all. We were both carrying his child, but one was cherished and treated like a queen, while the other was seen as a thorn in the side, even plotted against. I saved all the photos, organizing them carefully. I had proof of the affair. Now, I just had to wait for the lab results of that herbal remedy. I had a bad feeling that the result would be an even greater shock than what I already knew. I wasn't wrong. That afternoon, the lab called me. The voice of the technician on the other end was grave. "Is this Eleanor Hayes? We have the test results for your sample. We strongly advise you to come in person to pick them up and receive a consultation. And please, under no circumstances should you consume any more of this substance." My heart plummeted. I rushed to the lab. The head technician handed me the detailed report. I skimmed through the complex chemical terms and stopped at the final conclusion. The sample contains significant amounts of saffron and other active compounds. When combined, these ingredients can induce strong uterine contractions, leading to a high risk of miscarriage in pregnant women, especially during the first trimester. Miscarriage. The prenatal tonic my mother-in-law had so kindly given me was a disguised abortion potion. My hand trembled, and the test report fell to the floor. My entire body went cold. They didn't just want me gone. They wanted to kill my child, make her miscarry, then throw her out. Julian's words echoed in my ears. It wasn't just a threat spoken in anger, it was a plan. A plan that was being carried out with cold-hearted precision. I couldn't cry anymore. The pain had transformed into a towering inferno of rage. I picked up the report, clenching it in my hand. "Julian, Sharon, you have crossed the line. You don't just want my fortune and my happiness. You want to take the life of my child. There will be no more mercy in this play. I will make you pay the highest price for this unforgivable crime." But how could I expose this wicked conspiracy while I was still trapped in my own home? The lab report in my hand felt as heavy as lead. It wasn't just evidence of a malicious plot. It was the death sentence they had written for my unborn child. I couldn't just sit back and take it anymore. I had to get out of there, to protect my child at all costs. Returning home, I put on the facade of a weak and tired pregnant woman suffering from morning sickness. I told my mother-in-law that I'd been feeling dizzy and had no appetite. Hearing this, Sharon showed no concern. Instead, a flicker of cruel joy flashed in her eyes. She became even more solicitous. "Well, then you must drink the tonic I make for you," she cooed. "It's very nourishing. You'll feel better right away." From that day on, she would personally prepare the tonic and bring it to my room, and I played my part perfectly. Each time, I would accept it with a profusion of thanks. Then, As soon as she left, I would secretly pour it into the potted plant on my balcony. I kept all the bowls, letting the dregs dry out and storing them carefully. They were all crucial pieces of evidence. I knew I couldn't count on Julian's help. He was the mastermind. I couldn't just call the police either, as I was under constant surveillance. One careless move, and they would act immediately. I needed a plan, a flawless plan to escape safely and expose their entire crime. Then, an opportunity presented itself in the most unexpected way. One morning, Julian came home looking triumphant. He announced to my mother-in-law, "Mom, I've finalized the contract with Anson Corporation. The chairman is throwing a celebration party this weekend at a resort in the Hamptons. He's invited our whole family for a few days' vacation." Sharon was overjoyed. "Is that true, son? Oh, that's wonderful. We must go. We have to show everyone how blessed our family is." She turned to me, her voice dripping with condescension. "Eleanor, you get ready too. This trip will be a good change of scenery for you, good for both mother and child." I bowed my head, feigning excitement. "Yes, thank you, Mom. Thank you, Julian." But inside, a daring plan was already forming. The Hamptons. A distant, crowded place. It was the perfect God-given opportunity for me to escape. I began to prepare in secret. Using the excuse of needing new maternity dresses for the party, I asked my mother-in-law for permission to go shopping. She hesitated, but perhaps because she was so elated about the trip, she agreed, on the condition that a housekeeper accompany me to look after me. I knew it was to supervise me, but I cheerfully accepted. At the mall, I didn't head for the clothing stores right away. I told the housekeeper I needed to use the restroom. Taking advantage of her distraction, I slipped out a different exit and went straight to an electronics store. Using the small amount of cash I had secretly saved, I bought a cheap burner phone and a new SIM card. Then I quickly returned, carrying a few shopping bags so no one would be suspicious. With the phone in my possession, I felt like I had the world at my fingertips. That night, when the house was asleep, I hid in the bathroom, my hands trembling as I dialed the number of the only person I could trust now, my best friend from college, Chloe. "Hello? Who's this?" Chloe's sleepy voice came through the phone. "Chloe, it's me, Eleanor," I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. There was a pause, and then Chloe shouted, "Oh my God, Ellie, where have you been? I've been trying to call you. I even went to your house, and they said you went away. Do you know how worried I've been?" I'm in trouble, Chloe." I burst into tears, the pent-up anguish finally overflowing. I told her everything, from being a virtual prisoner to the deception and the plot to harm my child. On the other end, Chloe's reaction went from stunned silence to pure rage. "Oh my God, those monsters, they're not human. Ellie, you have to get out of there now. Where are you? Tell me. I'll come get you." "No, you can't," I stopped her. "They're watching me very carefully, but this weekend, they're taking me to the Hamptons. It's my only chance. Chloe, I need your help." I told Chloe my plan. I would find a way to separate from the group in the Hamptons. I needed her to have a car ready, some cash, and most importantly, to contact a very good lawyer for me. "Don't you worry," Chloe said, her voice firm. "Leave everything to me. You just focus on keeping yourself and the baby safe. Eleanor, this time, we're not letting them get away with it." The call ended, and I felt a new surge of strength. I wasn't alone anymore. I had friends, people who were willing to stand by me. For Julian's family, this trip to the Hamptons was a victory celebration. But for me, it would be a dramatic escape, the first shot fired in a devastating counterattack. They had no idea that the prey they were casually leading to the slaughter was actually a tiger waiting to be uncaged. On the day we left for the Hamptons, I deliberately chose a loose, dark-colored maternity dress and carried only a small handbag with a few essentials. I had to look weak and submissive, so no one would be on guard. Julian's family, in contrast, was dressed to the nines, adorned with sparkling jewelry, their faces glowing with smug triumph. Especially my mother-in-law, Sharon. She wore a striking velvet gown, laughing and talking loudly as if she were the main character of the party. A luxurious limousine drove us to a 5-star resort by the sea. The place was like a paradise, with long stretches of white sand, green palm trees rustling in the wind, and private villas with their own pools. But to my eyes, this opulent scenery only highlighted the hypocrisy and cruelty of the people I was with. The evening party was held outdoors, right by the beach. Twinkling lights, gentle music, the sound of waves crashing. Julian, in an elegant white suit, walked onto the stage hand in hand with Isabella Vance. She wore a shimmering evening gown. Her baby bump was very large, but her face radiated happiness. They looked like a perfect couple. The chairman of Anson Corporation, Isabella's father, stood beside them, patting Julian's shoulder with pride. I sat at a secluded table next to my mother-in-law. She kept leaning in to whisper in my ear, her voice dripping with mockery. "See? Isn't my Julian brilliant? Marrying the chairman's daughter, he's set for life. You'll benefit from this too, you know. Just be content and take care of my grandchild for me." I just lowered my head and gave a faint smile, my hand clenched into a fist under the table. Content? Never. I made an excuse that I wasn't feeling well and wanted to go back to the room to rest. Sharon glanced at me and nodded. "All right, go rest. Remember to drink the tonic I left for you on the table." Tonic again. I knew she would never give up on her scheme. I smiled. "Yes, I know." Then I leaned on the chair, stood up slowly, and walked away with a tired, unsteady gait. But as soon as I was out of their sight, I quickened my pace, turning down a different path, not the one leading to our family's villa. I headed towards the main lobby of the resort. According to my plan with Chloe, she was waiting for me there. My heart pounded in my chest. Freedom was just a few hundred feet away. But just as I neared the lobby, a familiar voice rang out from behind me, cold and sharp. "And where do you think you're going, Eleanor?" I jumped and spun around. It was Julian. He was standing not far from me, hands in his pockets, his face no longer gentle and charming, but twisted into a mocking smirk. "Julian, why aren't you at the party?" I stammered, trying to stay calm. "What's a party compared to my beloved wife?" He walked slowly towards me, his eyes fixed on me. "Did you really think you could outsmart me? Did you think I wouldn't know about your childish little games?" A chill ran through me. He knew my plan. But how? I had been so careful. The burner phone, the secret calls in the bathroom. "Did you think I wouldn't notice?" he sneered. Eleanor, you're still so naive. Did you know? In that house, not a single move you make escapes my mother's and my notice." He was very close now, just an arm's length away. "Now, my love, let's go back to the party. Don't spoil the fun for everyone." He reached out to grab my hand. "No!" I shouted, taking a step back. "I'm not going anywhere. You're a monster." "A monster?" He laughed out loud, a maniacal laugh. "That's right, I'm a monster, but since you're the monster's wife, don't ever dream of escaping." He swung his hand and slapped me hard across the face. The stunning blow sent my head spinning, my cheek burning. I staggered and fell onto the grass beside the path. "Don't frighten her." Another voice suddenly emerged from the darkness. A tall man stepped out, blocking the space between Julian and me. It was Leo, Mr. Miller's son. He was wearing the resort's security uniform. "Who the hell are you?" Julian roared, his eyes filled with fury. "I'm the one who won't let you touch her," Leo said, his voice firm. "So it's you," Julian sneered, "the son of that useless old man. You're all a bunch of ungrateful traitors." "The one who's ungrateful knows who they are," Leo retorted fearlessly. "Mr. Thorne, I advise you to return to your party. Don't make things ugly." "Are you threatening me?" Julian lunged at Leo, swinging a fist. But Leo was faster. He dodged the punch and used a martial arts move to throw Julian to the ground. "I don't want to use violence, but if you force me," Leo said, holding Julian down. "Eleanor, go! Go now!" he yelled at me. I was stunned for a moment, then scrambled to my feet and ran for my life towards the main lobby. The sounds of Julian's cursing and the struggle echoed behind me. I didn't dare look back. I just ran towards the light, ran towards freedom. I burst into the lobby and saw Chloe waiting by the door, her face etched with worry. "Ellie," she cried, rushing over to support me. "Your face, did that bastard hit you? Let's go, Chloe, hurry!" I pulled her hand, my voice frantic. We rushed out the door and jumped into the waiting car. The engine roared to life, and the car sped off into the night, leaving the luxurious resort, leaving that hell on earth, behind. I looked back through the rear window and saw the figures of Julian and a few other security guards chasing after us. But it was too late. My escape, though not entirely smooth, was ultimately a success. Now, a new battle, a more direct and fierce battle, awaited me. The car sped through the night, taking me away from the Hamptons, away from the nightmare named Julian Thorne. I sat in the back seat, my hands still trembling, one cheek stinging, but my heart filled with a strange sense of freedom. I was out. My child and I were safe. Leo, will he be okay? I turned to Chloe, worried for the young man who had bravely protected me. Don't worry, Chloe reassured me as she drove. Leo's a smart kid. Besides, he's wearing a security uniform. Julian won't dare do anything too drastic. I told him to just hold him off for a bit and then find a way to get out of there. I also notified the resort's main security team. We didn't head straight back to New York City. Chloe had prepared a small, discreet rental in another coastal town. We'll stay here for a few days, she said. Let things cool down and give you some time to rest and prepare for the fight ahead. That night, for the first time in months, I slept soundly, free from fear and nightmares. The next morning, I woke to warm sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of birds chirping. Chloe had prepared a hearty breakfast. Eat up, warrior mama, she smiled, handing me a glass of warm milk. Looking at her smile, her genuine care, my eyes welled up. While I was surrounded by deceitful, cruel people, there were still true friends out there, willing to go through anything for me. Thank you, Chloe, I said, my voice choked. Without you, I don't know what I would have done. Don't thank me, Chloe waved her hand. Now's not the time to get emotional. Look at the lawyer I found for you. She handed me her tablet. On the screen was the profile of a female lawyer named Jessica Wright. She had a kind smile, but her track record was incredibly impressive. She specialized in complex divorce and asset dispute cases, particularly those involving domestic abuse. She's brilliant and has a strong sense of justice, Chloe explained. I've already contacted her and given her a brief overview of your case. She said she's ready to meet whenever you are. I'm ready now, I said, my voice firm. I can't wait any longer. The next day, we returned to New York City and went straight to Jessica Wright's law office. After listening to my entire story, from being a virtual prisoner to the deception and the plot to harm my child, Jessica couldn't hide her indignation. She squeezed my hand, her eyes filled with sympathy but also fierce determination. You've endured far too much, Eleanor, she said. Now, it's time for us to act. With the evidence you have, the lab results from the tonic, the photos of the affair, Mr. Miller's testimony, we can file a lawsuit against Julian and his entire family on multiple charges: false imprisonment, assault, and most seriously, attempted murder. In the civil suit, we will demand a divorce and compel him to compensate you for all material and emotional damages. Hearing Jessica's words, I felt a surge of strength. For the first time, the path ahead seemed clear. I was no longer a lone, helpless victim. I had the law on my side. I had people ready to fight with me. That very afternoon, the first lawsuit was filed. At the same time, following Jessica's advice, I went to the hospital to have my facial injury and the baby's health documented, obtaining a medical certificate of my injuries. Every step was carefully calculated. As expected, just a day after receiving the court summons, Julian's family began to fight back. But this time, they didn't use violence or direct threats. They used a far more insidious weapon: the media and public opinion. An article headlined, "The Truth Behind the Five-Star Resort Scuffle, Jealous Wife Fabricates Story to Frame Husband's Family," suddenly appeared on a gossip website. The article painted a completely different picture. In their version, I was a jealous, paranoid wife, unable to accept her husband's success and social connections. They claimed I had invented the story of being harmed to stir up drama, that the bruise on my face was from falling while drunk. They even insinuated that I had an improper relationship with the fired security guard. The article spread like wildfire. In the comments section, a flood of fake accounts hurled insults at me, calling me a crazy woman, a gold digger, and bitterly jealous. They turned me from a victim into a villain. The bastards! Chloe slammed the table in anger after reading the comments. They have no humanity left. Eleanor, we have to respond. We have to set the record straight. I shook my head, calmly scrolling through the comments. There's no need, Chloe. The more they do this, the more it shows they're scared. Let them have their stage. The louder the play, the more dramatic the curtain call. I looked at Chloe, a cold smile forming on my lips. They want to play dirty with the media? Fine. But they've forgotten one thing. I still have an ace up my sleeve they could never have expected. While the media firestorm created by Julian's family raged across social media, I chose to remain silent. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I quietly worked with my lawyer, Jessica, to gather more evidence and prepare for the first mediation session at court. My silence only emboldened the other side. They assumed I had run out of arguments, that I was scared. Julian even had the audacity to go on a popular daytime talk show, playing the part of a pitiful husband misunderstood by his wife, heartbroken over his crumbling family. "I still love my wife very much," he said, his voice thick with feigned emotion, his eyes welling up. "It's all just a terrible misunderstanding. I hope she can calm down and give me a chance to explain, to heal things together." His performance was flawless. Many viewers believed him and turned on me, calling me a heartless woman. On the day of the mediation, I arrived at the courthouse surrounded by reporters. They shoved cameras in my face, asking provocative questions. "Miss Hayes, do you have anything to say about your husband's accusations? Is it true you fabricated the story to harm your in-laws?" I didn't answer, just walked silently inside. Inside the mediation room, Julian and his mother, Sharon, were already waiting. Seeing me, Julian stood up quickly, his face a mask of anguish. "Eleanor, you finally came. I was so worried about you." Sharon sat still, giving me a look of contempt mixed with triumph. The judge began the session by summarizing both parties' requests. Julian's side did not agree to a divorce. They claimed it was all a misunderstanding and they still wanted to reconcile the family. It was a clever move, designed to paint them as a forgiving, noble family, while casting me as the stubborn wife bent on destroying her marriage. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't say much about my own suffering. I just said calmly, "Your Honor, I have nothing left to say regarding our personal feelings. I would just like to present some evidence to show the court why I cannot continue this marriage." I glanced at Jessica. She understood, stood up, and placed a tablet on the table. "Your Honor, before we proceed with the main evidence, we would like to show a short video." The tablet was connected to a large screen in the room. Both Julian and his mother raised their eyebrows, curious about what trick I was about to pull. The video began. It showed a corner of a familiar yard with an old doghouse. Then, a man appeared, his back to the camera. It was Uncle Rick, Sharon's brother. He was talking on the phone. His voice was crystal clear. "Don't you worry, sis. Everything's under control. That girl is as obedient as a puppy. Just keep her in there a little longer, and she'll break down completely. Then we can do whatever we want." He let out a triumphant laugh. "Mr. Harrison seems to be getting impatient. He keeps asking when the new shipment is coming in." The color drained from Sharon's face. She stared at the screen, her hands gripping the arms of her chair. Julian was also stunned, turning to look at his mother in disbelief. The video was shot discreetly from a hidden angle, perhaps from a neighbor's house, but that wasn't all. The scene changed. This time, it was hidden camera footage from inside a coffee shop. The people in the video were Julian and Uncle Rick, sitting across from each other. "Don't you do anything reckless," Uncle Rick's voice was harsh. "If this gets out, the whole family goes to prison. Your mother already told you. We have to wait until after she gives birth. That baby is the best hostage to force her to hand over everything," Julian replied, his voice trembling slightly. "But I'm afraid she'll find out. The baby, it's my child." "So what if it's your child?" Uncle Rick sneered. "It might be your child, but it's also my grandchild. Have you forgotten who gave you everything you have today? If you dare disobey me and Mr. Harrison, don't blame me for being cruel." Their conversation laid everything bare. a conspiracy even more horrific than I had imagined. Uncle Rick wasn't just an abuser, he was the mastermind, the one pulling the strings, manipulating everyone, including Julian and my mother-in-law. And there was another mysterious figure, Mr. Harrison. The video ended, and a dead silence fell over the room. The judge stared at Julian and his mother, his face grim. Sharon was trembling, her face as white as a sheet. She stammered, "No, that's not. It's fabricated. She fabricated it to frame us." Julian slumped in his chair, his head in his hands, speechless. He had been sold out by his own uncle. "Your Honor," Jessica spoke, her voice steely. "This video was provided by a completely unexpected witness, someone who secretly recorded everything because they could no longer stand by and watch this crime unfold. And that person is Isabella Vance's husband." Another shockwave hit the room. Isabella's husband. Why would he do that? Jessica continued. Miss Vance's husband had suspected his wife of having an affair for a long time. He hired a private investigator to follow her and inadvertently uncovered this entire conspiracy. He contacted us and decided to provide the evidence, not only to expose the man who destroyed his family's happiness, but also to save an innocent woman. My ace had finally been played. It wasn't just a piece of evidence, it was a bomb that obliterated all the lies, all the attempts by Julian's family to deny their guilt. The triumphant look on Sharon's face had vanished, replaced by sheer panic and terror. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a murderous rage, but also with utter helplessness. Their play had truly come to an end. The bomb Jessica had just detonated sent tremors through the mediation room. After a few seconds of stunned silence, Sharon shot up from her chair, pointed at me, and shrieked hysterically, "It was you! You set this all up! You colluded with outsiders to frame my family, you venomous snake!" She tried to lunge at me but was restrained by 2 court security officers. The judge slammed his gavel down. "Silence! Ma'am, maintain order, or I will have you removed." The authority of the law finally made her back down. She collapsed into her chair, panting, her eyes still blazing with hatred for me. Meanwhile, Julian remained motionless, a hollow shell of a man, his eyes staring blankly into space. The shock of being manipulated by the uncle he feared, and the truth of being investigated by his mistress's husband, was too much for him to bear. He had lost, utterly and humiliatingly. The mediation could not continue. The judge declared a recess and ordered that the video and all related evidence be handed over to the police for investigation into criminal activities. As I walked out of the room with Jessica and Chloe, I could feel the change in the reporter's eyes. The probing, provocative glares were gone, replaced by silence and perhaps a hint of awe. The truth had been exposed in a way that could not be denied. The narrative Julian's family had painstakingly built to smear me had crumbled into dust. That very afternoon, major news outlets ran stories about the shocking developments at the mediation. The video, though faces and voices were blurred, was enough for the public to understand the true nature of the situation. The wave of online outrage did a 180-degree turn, aimed squarely at Julian's family. They were dubbed the Devil Family, people devoid of humanity. The social media profiles of Julian, Isabella, and the slanderous articles were all relentlessly attacked by the public. The following days were a cascade of collapse for their family. The police officially launched an investigation. Uncle Rick was arrested for masterminding the plot, issuing threats, and extortion. Sharon and Julian were repeatedly summoned for questioning. Their family business, already struggling, was pushed to the brink of bankruptcy as partners canceled contracts and banks called in their loans. I didn't feel triumphant, just a profound sense of exhaustion and emptiness. The battle was almost over, but the wounds it left on my heart would never fully heal. A few days later, I received a call from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. "Eleanor?" "It's Mark, Isabella's husband." The man's voice was low and weary. "Thank you," I said sincerely. "You helped me and my unborn child." "It's nothing," he sighed. "I'm just trying to salvage what's left of my own family. But I'm calling today because there's something I think you should know." He paused. "In the recordings my investigator gathered, there's a conversation between Julian and his uncle. They mentioned your father." My heart seized. My father? He was gone. I know. Mark's voice turned more serious. They said his death wasn't just from his illness. They said Julian did something to the traditional medicine he was taking in his final days. My body froze, a roaring in my ears. I couldn't hear what Mark said next. My father, his death, was it also part of their plan? I remembered my father's final months. He had weakened so quickly, much faster than the doctors had predicted. And I remembered how Julian had played the part of the incredibly devoted son-in-law. He had found the herbalist himself, prepared the medicine daily, and brought it to my father. At the time, I was so moved, so certain I had found a good man to depend on. It turned out that all the tears, the loving words, the devoted care, it was all just part of a monstrous play. I sank to the floor, the phone slipping from my hand. The pain in my chest was more intense than when I found out I was betrayed, more intense than when I learned they wanted to harm my child. This was a pain that pierced my very soul. They hadn't just stolen my happiness, they might have stolen the life of the father I loved more than anyone. I don't know how long I sat there until Chloe burst through the door, rushing to my side. "Ellie, Ellie, what's wrong? Snap out of it." I looked up at her, my eyes dry, devoid of tears. "Chloe," I whispered, "I have to make them pay. For everything." The fire of hatred in me now blazed into a hurricane. I wouldn't just seek justice for myself, I would seek justice for my father. This war wasn't over, it had just entered its most brutal chapter, and I wondered, how much more horrifying could the final truth about my father's death be? The shock of my father's death transformed my grief into a cold, sharp weapon. I no longer cried, no longer felt weak. Every cell in my body now existed for a single purpose: to drag the full extent of the Thorne family's crimes into the light. I immediately contacted Jessica, informing her of the new development. She was stunned, but, with the experience of a seasoned lawyer, quickly regained her composure. "Eleanor, this is an extremely serious accusation. We need concrete proof, not just a vague recording," she said cautiously. "Do you still have anything related to the medicines Julian prepared for your father?" I searched my memory. "I'm not sure. It's been so many years. But I remember my father kept a journal. He used to log every medication he took, both traditional and Western." "Where is that journal?" Jessica asked urgently. "It's still in his study, at the estate," I replied. We immediately obtained a court order to access the property under the guise of collecting personal belongings. Julian and his family, now under investigation and house arrest, couldn't stop us. Stepping back into the house that was once my home, my heart was heavy. Everything was as I had left it, but the air was cold and desolate. I went straight to my father's study, a room I had barely dared to enter for the past 5 years, afraid to confront the pain of loss. The room was still as neat as when he was alive. With a trembling hand, I opened his desk drawer, and there it was, the dark brown leather-bound journal, tucked neatly under a pile of old documents. I flipped through the pages. My father's handwriting was still strong and clear. He had recorded everything meticulously: date, medication, dosage. I turned to the last few pages, from the final months of his life. And then, my heart stopped. Alongside the Western medicines prescribed by his doctor, my father had noted the names of a few unfamiliar herbal ingredients. Next to them, a note: "Tonic from Julian." Below that, in a shakier script, my father had added another line: "Feeling more tired after drinking, dull ache in my stomach. Asked Julian. He said it's an initial reaction to the medicine." I handed the journal to Jessica. She examined it carefully, then called an expert in traditional pharmacology. After she read out the names of the herbs, the expert on the other end of the line was silent for a long moment. "Counselor," he finally said, "individually, these herbs can nourish the body, but when combined and taken over a long period by someone with a pre-existing stomach condition, they create a chronic toxin. It slowly destroys the internal organs, worsens the primary illness, and neutralizes the effects of Western medicine." Everything was crystal clear. It wasn't a mistake, it was a calculated, diabolical murder plot. Julian had exploited my father's trust and my love to slowly poison him, all to seize his assets. That animal, Chloe, standing beside me, couldn't help but cry out. As for me, I just clutched my father's journal. The hatred inside me had reached its peak. "We have enough evidence," Jessica said, her voice firm. "This journal, along with Mark's testimony and the recording, is enough for us to request an exhumation and a new autopsy to determine your father's cause of death." But I shook my head. "That won't be necessary," I said, my voice as cold as ice. "I don't want my father's eternal rest to be disturbed. I have another way. A way that will make them confess to their crimes themselves." The next day, I requested a private meeting with Julian at the detention center. The meeting was arranged in a small room with a glass partition. When Julian was let in, he looked gaunt and pathetic. His once perfectly styled hair was a mess, his face was hollow, and his eyes were lifeless. Seeing me, he looked surprised, then a flicker of hope appeared in his eyes. "Eleanor, you came to see me?" he stammered. I didn't answer. I just silently placed my father's journal on the counter and pushed it through the slot towards him. "Read it. You still remember my father's handwriting, don't you?" Julian picked up the journal. As he read the final entries, his expression shifted from hope to horror, then turned deathly pale. He looked up at me, his lips trembling. This is... "Yes," I looked straight into his eyes, my voice devoid of emotion. "It's your crime, recorded in the handwriting of the man you so cruelly murdered. Julian, you know, I could have his body exhumed for an autopsy, but I didn't." "Why? Why not?" he asked, utterly bewildered. "Because I wanted to give you one last chance," I said, leaning closer to the glass. "A chance to tell the truth yourself, to atone for a small fraction of what you've done. If you don't, I won't just submit this journal to the court. I will make sure that Sharon, your mother, who conspired and concealed your crimes, receives a sentence just as harsh for what she did to me and my child. You might be able to handle prison, but can you bear to watch your elderly mother locked away too?" My psychological blow hit his only remaining weak spot. He might be a monster, but he still had a shred of filial piety. He slumped into the chair, buried his head in his hands, and began to sob broken, desperate sobs of remorse. "I was wrong. I was so wrong, Eleanor." And then, through his tears, he confessed everything. He said it was Uncle Rick who had instigated it, who told him that once my father was gone, all the assets would be mine, and as my husband, he could easily control everything. It was Mr. Harrison who had provided the poison, disguised as a health tonic, and his mother, Sharon. She knew everything, but chose to remain silent, condoning her son's horrific crime. I listened, no longer feeling hatred, only disgust and a profound sadness. The play had truly reached its finale, a horrifying play built on greed, cruelty, and a complete loss of humanity. I stood up and walked away, leaving the murderer's belated cries behind me. Julian's tearful confession in the detention center became the final, irrefutable piece of evidence that closed the case. Everything that followed happened in a whirlwind. With the mastermind's confession, investigators had enough to file additional charges of murder against Julian, Uncle Rick, and Mr. Harrison. My mother-in-law, Sharon, was also arrested for being an accomplice and concealing a crime. The news caused a seismic shock. The public, already outraged by the deception and false imprisonment, was horrified to learn the truth about my father's death. The case was no longer a family drama. It had become a major, sensational criminal trial. On the day of the final verdict, the area around the city courthouse was packed. I didn't go. I had no desire to see their pathetic faces again. I just sat at home with Chloe, watching the news on television. My baby, now over 7 months along, would occasionally kick and squirm, as if sensing my tension. On the screen, one by one, the familiar faces were led into the courtroom. Julian was skeletal, his eyes sunken, looking as if he had aged a decade. Uncle Rick was sullen, his head bowed. Mr. Harrison tried to maintain his composure, but his trembling hands betrayed his fear. But it was Sharon who caught my attention. Her hair had turned completely white. Her body was stooped, and she had lost all aura of the confident business owner she once was. The trial was swift. Faced with irrefutable evidence and confessions from the accused themselves, any defense was futile. the final sentences were read. The highest penalty death was given to the mastermind, Uncle Rick, for murder and a string of other crimes. Mr. Harrison, as an accomplice who provided the means, received a life sentence. And Julian, the husband I once loved, the man who had personally poisoned my father, also received a life sentence for his heinous crime. Sharon, for her role as an accomplice and for obstruction of justice, but considering her age and last-minute confession, received a sentence of 15 years in prison. Upon hearing the verdict, she fainted in the courtroom. I turned off the television and let out a long breath. Justice had finally been served. Hot tears rolled down my cheeks. But this time, they were not tears of pain or hatred, but tears of release. "Dad," I whispered, "you can rest in peace now. I did it." Chloe hugged me, gently patting my back. "It's all over, Eleanor. From now on, you just need to live a truly happy life." In the days that followed, the case continued to be a hot topic in the news, but I no longer paid attention. I devoted all my time to preparing for my child's arrival. I personally decorated the nursery, bought tiny diapers and onesies. The vast, once cold estate was now filled with a warm, expectant atmosphere. One afternoon, while organizing things in my father's study, I found an old wooden box. Inside were his keepsakes, a few black and white photos, his favorite fountain pen, and a yellowed savings passbook. I opened it. The account had been opened long ago, in my father's name, but what stunned me was the amount inside a fortune, and the sole authorized beneficiary was not me. It was a name I had never seen before, Elizabeth Ann Baker. Attached was an address in a quiet, rural town in the Midwest. Why would my father leave so much money to a stranger? Who was she, and why had he never told me about her? I called my father's old lawyer, the one who had handled his will. After hearing my question, he was silent for a long moment, then sighed. "So you found it, Eleanor. I thought that secret would be buried forever." "What secret, sir?" I asked urgently. And then he told me a story, a sad love story from my father's youth. Miss Baker was his first love, a woman he had loved deeply but could not marry due to family opposition. Later in life, after he had become successful, he learned that she had never married and was living a hard life alone in her hometown. He had secretly opened this savings account, depositing money every month as a way to atone for the past. "Your father instructed me to only inform her after he passed away," the lawyer said, his voice emotional. "But then, with all the turmoil that followed, I forgot. I'm truly sorry, Eleanor." I hung up, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. So, the perfect father in my eyes also had his own secrets, his own sorrows. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let my father's final wish be forgotten. 2 weeks later, I traveled alone to that rural Midwestern town. Miss Baker's house was at the end of a small, simple but clean alley. The woman who opened the door had silver-streaked hair, a kind face, and eyes that were clear and sad, just like my father's in his old photographs. I didn't need to introduce myself. She looked at me and seemed to understand everything. I handed her the passbook. She took it with trembling hands, her eyes welling up. She didn't say thank you, just quietly invited me in and made a pot of hot green tea. We sat together, not speaking of the past, just sharing simple stories about life. But I knew there was an invisible connection between us, a deep empathy. When I left, she walked me to the end of the alley. Before I got in the car, she took my hand and said softly, "Thank you, child. Not for the money, but for letting me know he never forgot." That sentence brought closure for both my father and for her. And in a way, it brought closure for me too. I realized that forgiving the past is the best way to start a new future. Returning from that trip, I felt an extraordinary sense of peace and lightness. Fulfilling my father's last wish seemed to have closed the final door to the past, allowing me to completely let go of the burdens I had carried for so long. Now, my mind was focused on one single, sweet, and eagerly awaited thing, my soon-to-be-born child. The day I went into labor, Chloe and Leo were by my side. They cared for me with more devotion than family. When my daughter's first cry echoed in the delivery room, I couldn't hold back my own tears. a beautiful, healthy baby girl with big, dark eyes just like mine. I held her in my arms, feeling her tiny warmth. All the pain, all the bitterness of the past seemed to melt away. She was the most precious gift, the beginning of a new chapter, a new life for me. I named her Serena, hoping her life would always be peaceful and free, unlike the storms her mother had endured. My life began to revolve around my little girl. The vast estate was no longer cold, it was filled with the laughter and babbling of a child. Chloe practically moved in, helping me care for Serena. Mr. Miller and Leo also visited often, sometimes fixing a fence, sometimes bringing fresh vegetables from their garden. They had become an indispensable part of my small family, a family built not on blood, but on kindness and sincerity. I was no longer a sharp businesswoman. I became a mother, learning to change diapers, mix formula, and sing lullabies. These simple tasks brought me a pure happiness I had never known in my previous life of hollow luxury. Time flew by. A year later, as Serena was taking her first wobbly steps, I decided it was time to do something more meaningful. I didn't return to the cutthroat world of business. Instead, I used a large portion of my inheritance to establish a charitable foundation in my father's name, the Arthur Hayes Foundation for Brighter Futures. The foundation's goal was to help single mothers in difficult circumstances, especially survivors of domestic abuse. We provided not only financial support but also vocational training and psychological counseling, helping them rebuild their confidence and start new, independent lives. I wanted to use my own story to empower other women so that no one would have to endure the pain and helplessness I had experienced. On the day of the foundation's launch, I stood on stage, holding my daughter, and looked out at the packed hall. I didn't use grand words. I simply told my story, a story of betrayal, struggle, and rebirth. I once lost everything, I said, my voice calm and sincere. My love, my trust, and almost the life of my child. But in my darkest moments, I realized that a woman's greatest strength lies not in her wealth or beauty, but in her unbreakable will and her ability to turn pain into purpose. I looked down at my daughter in my arms, then back at the audience. This foundation was created not to dwell on pain, but to prove one thing. No matter what life throws at us, we always have a choice. The choice to collapse in despair, or the choice to rise, stronger and more resilient than before. And I believe every woman here today is a warrior who will never choose to surrender. My speech touched the hearts of many. After the ceremony, numerous philanthropists and businesses pledged their support. My story was no longer a personal tragedy. It had become a source of inspiration, a flame spreading faith and hope. Occasionally, I'd hear news about Julian's family. After her release, Sharon lived alone in a small, rented apartment, forgotten by everyone. The family business was bankrupt. As for Isabella, I heard she divorced her husband after her son was born and moved abroad, cutting off all contact with Julian. Everyone had to pay the price for their own wrong choices. I no longer held any resentment. My life now had a completely different meaning. In the evenings, I would take Serena to the park and watch her run happily on the grass, her laughter echoing like crystal in the sunset. My heart would fill with an infinite peace. Sometimes, Serena asks about her father. I don't lie, nor do I embellish. I just tell her that her father was once someone her mother loved very much, but he made a very big mistake and is now learning a lifelong lesson. And that even without him, she will always have me, her grandmother Chloe, and all her uncles who love her unconditionally. My 5-year marriage was over, leaving a deep scar, but it also gave me a priceless gift. Serena. She is a testament to life, to love, and to a simple truth. True happiness doesn't come from wealth or a perfect romance. It comes from knowing your own worth, daring to stand up for what is right, and learning to love without reservation. Looking towards the horizon, where the sun was setting in a blaze of orange, I smiled. Another day had ended, and I knew that tomorrow a new dawn would come, brilliant and full of hope. From now on, my life would only be filled with such dawns.